Toyota have to do to get you interested in buying an Auris? Make it better to drive? Give it a sharper sense of style? Include a wider choice of more efficient engines? All that's been done with this much improved second generation model. A more confident Focus Class family hatch that's good value, British built and uniquely available in this segment with hybrid power. If you're shopping in this sector, you might not be considering it, but perhaps you should be.
We buy cars for all sorts of reasons, some sensible but others rather more personal. While it's the extreme designs that tend to grab the headlines, there's still a lot to be said for models that simply work ever so effectively in the real world, like this one, the significantly improved second generation version of Toyota's Auris. It's a family hatchback developed from experience that bought us the best-selling car of this kind in history, Toyota's Corolla, 35 million examples of which were sold in its lifetime before the first-generation Auris model took over in 2007. This original Auris, its name derived from the Latin aurum for gold, arrived as a safe and sensible choice that built upon the strengths of its predecessor without threatening the Focus and Golf fraternity in any particular way. It did, though, have the distinction of pioneering hybrid power in this segment back in 2010. But the world's biggest brand needed to go further in a market increasingly demanding more dynamic, appealingly styled, high-tech and efficient products. With tough competition, not only from the mainstream makers, but also from up-and-coming Korean budget brands, the company needed to give the Auris a more contemporary look and feel. Hence, the original introduction of this second-generation version in 2012. Unfortunately, the sharper exterior looks weren't really replicated inside. And, more significantly, this model had to carry over much of its engineering from its first-generation predecessor. It all meant that Focus segment buyers not sold on the concept of hybrid power often ignored Toyota's contender in this class, an increasing problem for the Japanese brand in the face of the continually improving opposition. Hence the need for the heavily revised Mark II model Auris we're going to look at here, a car launched in the summer of 2015 and featuring a range of changes that have also allowed Toyota to launch this design in the American market. These enhancements include a smarter look, both inside and out, improved driving dynamics that deliver sharper steering, better ride quality and additional refinement, and a rejuvenated Euro 6 engine lineup featuring an all-new 1.2-litre turbocharged petrol power plant. There's also extra safety technology and cutting-edge connectivity to complete what is certainly a much improved package. But is it good enough to finally earn Toyota an unqualified recommendation in the tough, overpopulated Focus Class family hatchback segment? Let's find out. Toyota has never really prioritised the road-going dynamics of this car, or at least that's been the popular belief. The Japanese brand's perspective on that, though, is something different. Yes, they could make this car handle like their brilliant GT86 Sport Coupe if they wanted. No, they didn't think potential buyers would like it if they did. Hence the way that earlier Auris models were always comfortable and predictable, but generally forgettable to drive. So, is this improved second-generation version any different? Well, the answer to that depends upon your expectations. Let me explain. If your only experience of Auris motoring dates back pre-2012 to the original version, then this lighter, stiffer Mark II model with its lower centre of gravity will feel dynamically much improved. If, though, you quite enjoy your driving and you've already tried the pre-facelifted version of this car, or you're familiar with just about any of the market's leading current Focus Class family hatchbacks, then you'll be harder to please. Now, to try and satisfy you, Toyota's engineers have made significant changes to this car's ride and handling balance, although only to further improve comfort and day-to-day ease of use. It all means that if you're the sort of family hatchback buyer who likes to throw your car about a bit, then in all probability you still won't like this one, which is why this Toyota tends to get dismissive reports from specialist motoring magazines. Amongst the people who actually buy family hatches of this kind, though, the response is often rather different, and these people may very well appreciate the changes that Toyota has made to this revised Mark II Auris model, with its rejuvenated range of Euro 6 engines. I'll get to the under-the-bonnet improvements in a minute, but before I do, I'll touch upon the three things that you might notice were you to test drive this car having owned the original version of this second-generation design. Probably the most obvious enhancement is that refinement is noticeably better, thanks to extra soundproofing and additional sealing throughout the body shell. As a result, we're now struggling to think of a quieter family hatch in this segment of the market. You might also notice the changes made to the electric power steering, the setup now featuring mapping that builds in steering weight as your speed rises, so there's less of a lifeless PlayStation game style feel through the bends. Finally, the ride's a fraction better thanks to a redesign of the front suspension, although the extent to which you'll notice this improvement will depend to some extent on the engine variant that you've chosen. This is because, as with Volkswagen Group brands, Toyota offers this car with two different rear suspension setups, one for cheaper, feebler variants and the other better suited to the power plants offering more willing performance. At the bottom of the range, that means that buyers opting for the two oldest Auris engines, the 99 brake horsepower 1.33 litre VVT-i petrol and the 90 brake horsepower 1.4 litre D4D diesel, must be satisfied with a rudimentary torsion bar rear suspension setup, and as a result, slightly crashy progress over the worst of our country's many tarmac imperfections. Keep your pace modest though, and you won't notice too much amiss. You're not likely to be pressing on much with either of these engines anyway, both needing around 12.5 seconds to get to 62 miles an hour en route to a top speed in the region of 110 miles an hour. Inevitably though, the substantially revised 1.4 litre diesel feels much the perkier of the two, thanks to the provision of nearly twice as much pulling power. Progress further up the range and things are a bit more sophisticated, both when it comes to rear suspension and also in the engine bay. All three of the other power plants in the Auris lineup come mated to double wishbone rear suspension that delivers a smoother ride. It's not quite as good as a super supple progress delivered by rivals like Ford's Focus or Hyundai's i30, but they feature expensive multi-link rear suspension setups that Toyota thinks, probably rightly, that Auris buyers won't want to have to pay extra for. We chose one of this model range's higher powered versions for this test, deciding to opt for the one that's the biggest news in the revised Auris lineup, this 116 brake horsepower 1.2 litre turbo petrol derivative. It's a variant that at last offers an alternative to buyers of this car who are in search of perkier petrol power but don't want to or can't quite afford to stretch up to the top hybrid derivative. This four-cylinder direct injection power plant improves on the performance of the original Mark II Auris model's thirstier petrol 1.6 while returning fuel and CO2 figures that are considerably better than those of that feebler entry-level 1.33 litre unit that I just mentioned. A decent combination of virtues then, underlined by a pleasing willingness to happily rev right up to the red line if necessary. Plus, it all happens with a smoothness that feels markedly superior to the rough soundtrack common to rival models with comparably performing three-cylinder units, Ford's 1 litre EcoBoost engine, for example. The performance on offer is also better than the Focus, 62 miles an hour from rest, occupying 10.1 seconds en route to 124 miles an hour, providing that you don't saddle the car with a sprint-sapping multi-drive S CVT automatic transmission. In theory, this is as rapid as Auris motoring gets. In practice, though, there's another engine that feels an even more willing performer. The 1.6 litre D4D diesel unit that Toyota co-developed with BMW may put out only 112 brake horsepower, but it offers nearly 50% more pulling power than this 1.2 litre petrol turbo, which makes a big difference when you're accelerating through the gears. For the record, 62 miles an hour in this top diesel derivative takes 10.5 seconds en route to 121 miles an hour. That only leaves the petrol-electric hybrid version of this car, the variant with technology still unique in this segment, combining a 1.8-litre VVT-I combustion engine with an electric motor to create a combined power output of 134 brake horsepower, accessible via a 6-speed CVT auto gearbox. In recent years, Toyota has tried to make this transmission do a better job of matching vehicle speed with engine revs, but it still thrashes around and whines rather uncontrollably when you rev it hard, or try to match Toyota's quoted performance stats of 62 miles an hour from rest in 10.9 seconds on the way to 112 miles an hour. Better to chill out, throttle back and enjoy the journey, at which point this car transforms itself into a beautifully laid-back, efficient form of family travel, particularly if you're able to activate EV mode, in which form this car can travel for up to a mile with silent, zero-emissions, full electric propulsion. The original design of this second-generation Auris model was a lot slicker than its predecessor, incorporating what Toyota calls its keen look, all sharp angles and smart, rakish lines. And that more purposeful, lower-slung styling has been further developed with this revised Mark II model, which features redesigned front and rear sections that aim to give the car a broader stance, and what the Japanese brand hopes will be a more prestigious and sophisticated presence. At the front, powerful upper wings underscore the lip of the bonnet, while the less prominent lower wing surfacing sweeps down into the upper part of a bumper that's been centrally recessed to incorporate a larger Toyota logo. From this badge, a pair of chrome wings flow into restyled headlamps that use LED technology for their built-in daytime running lights, and optionally, as here, can now incorporate that for the main lamp units too. The lower grille now runs the width of the car, with a narrower, chrome-accented centre section widening into deep pods that house integrated fog lights. In profile on this hatch model, you appreciate that more rakish shape I was talking about. From the beginning, a key feature of this second-generation model's design, which has a sharply angled windscreen plus blacked-out centre and rear pillars, all of it aiming at a sportier look. The changes made to this revised version further build on that, with longer front and rear overhangs and detail improvements like a neat shark fin roof antenna and restyled alloy wheels. Go for the Touring Sports Estate version and you get a tapering rear roofline that avoids the usual boxy station wagon look. At the rear, all variants feature this smart roof spoiler and a redesigned bumper that's deeper and supposed to look a bit more muscular. Sitting above, reflector lamp housings relocated into the corners and linked by this thin chrome trim line. Time to take a seat at the wheel. Here, quite frankly, a big step forward was needed. European customer expectations of cabin quality are very different to those in Toyota's Japanese home market, and the original version of this car had been left behind by more modern rivals in this regard. In response, the brand formed what it called a sensory quality team, who did their best to try and improve things with this revised model, and sure enough, it is a bit classier. Look around and you'll see that the cheap silver paint finishes have been replaced by real chrome. There's a classy piano black finish for these prominent door pulls, and the more curvaceous dashboard gets a smoother, soft touch surface, and this smart stitched trimming. There was only so much the development team could do, though, without the kind of complete redesign that's really needed here to match the best that competitors can offer. It seems a little ironic that so much effort has been put into harmonising final trimming touches when fundamental elements remain untouched. The fact that the dated-looking digital clock is placed so far away from your line of sight, for example. And the curious need for two different shapes of air vent, round ones in the corner of the dash and rectangular items in the middle of the fascia. The last issue seems to have been necessitated by the need for the centre console to incorporate a feature that all cars in this class apparently have to have these days, an infotainment touchscreen. This 7-inch item was introduced with the original version of this Mark II model, where it was branded Toyota Touch in its basic form, or Toyota Touch & Go if you ordered it with built-in sat-nav. belatedly realising that saddling anything that aims to reliably guide you somewhere with a name like Touch and Go was less than ideal, the marketers have now renamed this setup as either Toyota Touch 2 or Toyota Touch 2 with Go. It still does basically the same thing, fitted on all variants above entry-level trim and incorporating a rear-view camera that's actually very useful, given that the large rear pillars do otherwise create something of an over-the-shoulder blind spot. In addition, as you'd expect, this display marshals the usual audio, informational and Bluetooth phone functions, along with an optional navigation setup that includes access to the useful Google local search system. Top models get the system in cleverer Plus guise, where it builds in 3D city mapping, voice command recognition, an SOS breakdown call alert system and in-car Wi-Fi hotspot functionality. Anything this display can't tell you, it will probably be covered by the smart 4.2-inch TFT screen now built into the centre of the instrument binnacle, where it offers various trip computer functions, brings key infotainment features into your line of vision, and sits between two redesigned, recessed tube-style gauges. You view the whole thing through a 3-spoke multifunction wheel that's leather-stitched on most models and offers reach and rake adjustment that combines with the height-adjustable seat to ensure that it's easy to find a comfortable driving position. I should also mention that there's reasonable levels of cabin storage space with the usual cup holders, a compartment in front of the gear lever with connectivity points, and a useful roof-mounted sunglasses holder. Plus, as before, build quality from the British Burniston factory in Derbyshire seems unimpeachable. Let's move to the rear seat. Now, Toyota remains proud of the fact that this is still one of the most compact cars in the family hatchback class, although you might not think this to be a particularly good thing if you've a family of 5 to carry about. Fortunately, some very clever design has ensured that you don't notice the compact dimensions. Take the sloping rear roof height, for example, disguised here by the way that the ceiling gently bulges over your head. Or at least it does in a standard model. This one has been fitted with Toyota's optional Skyview panoramic glass roof, one of the largest we've seen in a car of this kind, and able to give the cabin a lovely, airy feel. Of course, when it comes to cheating the tape measure, there's only so far you can go with clever design and extra cost ambience. And as usual in this class, 3 passengers will be a little bit squashed here on the back seat. Still, thanks to the extra 20mm of rear legroom that the designers managed to free up in the original version of this second generation model, 2 people can really be quite comfortable. And out back, does the relatively compact shape compromise boot space? Well, not really. There's quite a high loading lip, but the wider tailgate opening introduced with the original version of this second generation model is welcome. And beyond it, there's the capacity to swallow up to 435 litres if you load up to the roof, which is pretty good by class standards and far more than you get from, say, a rival Ford Focus. It's also worth noting that you don't have to compromise on this figure if you choose the hybrid model. So carefully have that variant's batteries been packaged in. In standard form, all models get a useful adjustable height boot floor. Now, I haven't got it here because this car has been specified with an optional space saver spare wheel, which I think you'd really want because otherwise you have to put up with one of those irritating tyre repair kits. If you need more room, you can, as usual, push forward the 60/40 split folding rear backrest, which in this case reveals up to 1,199 litres of total space. If that's something you're going to be doing quite often, then you're probably better off considering the Touring Sports Estate body style, which is 285mm longer and features a bumper sill 80mm lower for easier loading. Here there's a 672-litre boot capacity that's extendable to 1,658 litres with the rear bench folded, in which format items of up to 2 metres long can be accommodated. Recognising that the rivals for this car are priced more aggressively than ever, Toyota has, at first glance anyway, sensibly kept this Auris very affordable. You're looking at variants listing in the £16,000 to £23,000 bracket. Across the lineup, there's a simple body style choice between either this 5-door hatch or, for a premium of around £1,100, a touring sports estate. We should point out that the bottom of the range asking price figure just mentioned isn't especially representative of the engine technology this car now wants to offer. An outlay of around £16,000 only gets you Toyota's oldest, feeblest 1.33 litre petrol engine. Ideally, you'll want to start your search for an Auris with the much pokier, more efficient 1.2 litre petrol turbo power plant that we're trying here, although that means a price starting point of just under £19,000. Unlike the other conventional engines in the range, this unit is offered with the option of Toyota's CVT Multi-Drive S automatic transmission for a premium of £1,000. The other petrol option in the lineup only comes as an automatic, the 1.8 litre VVT-i hybrid variant that over 50% of Auris buyers choose. You can now get this unit with entry-level trim, hence a more affordable-looking starting price of around £20,000 for petrol electric Auris motoring. If you remain set on a 1.4 or 1.6 litre D4D diesel derivative, then you'll need much the same kind of outlay. On to consideration of the value proposition that all of that represents in the Focus Class family hatchback segment, at which point you realise that Toyota has priced this car in much the way you'd expect it would. So prices are broadly comparable to those of similarly spec'd and powered Ford Focus and Vauxhall Astra models. But you'll save a reasonable amount in comparison to a Volkswagen Golf, between £1,000 and £2,000, depending on the variant that you're looking at. And beyond the mainstream choices in this part of the market? Well, you need to bear in mind that key engines in the Auris lineup, this 1.2 litre turbo petrol unit and both of the diesels, aren't available with the kind of stripped-out entry-level trim that many rivals offer, and that can make these variants look expensive. This is particularly true when it comes to diesel power. Many competitors can provide black pump fueled options in this sector that start well below the £20,000 price point needed in this case. Check out most of these alternative models in comparable mid-range spec though, and this Toyota's figures stack up much better. Yes, you would still be looking at having to find more than you would for a budget brand contender like Kia's Ceed, Skoda's Octavia, or something like a Citroën C4. But otherwise, we're looking here at a reasonably competitive proposition. And that only leaves the Auris hybrid model. There's only one other petrol-electric hybrid contender in this class, and it's one you'll find in the same showroom, Toyota's Prius. With a Prius, though, you're having to find a premium of around £2,000 or so to get exactly the same technology in a car almost precisely the same size. Many Auris hybrid buyers, though, will be considering the petrol-electric option in preference to one of the eco-orientated diesel models in this segment. Many of these will undercut this Auris by £1,000 or so, but you might well get much of that difference back courtesy of the tax breaks delivered by the lower CO2 figures that come as part and parcel of hybrid motoring. If, having considered all of this and looked at all the different Auris engine options, you conclude it is this Toyota that you really want, then you'll be pleased to find that whichever 5-door hatchback or estate touring sports variant that you choose, it'll come reasonably equipped. Entry-level active trim is useful if you're looking at a hybrid model because it gives you the option of buying into this engine at an affordable price. The fact that this spec level otherwise limits you to the feeblest 1.33 litre petrol power plant is quite restrictive though. Plus, it does also make you do without the Toyota Touch 2 multimedia and DAB digital radio system that on other derivatives really completes the interior of this car. Active models do get a decent quality 4-speaker audio system with aux-in and USB sockets, plus LED technology for the daytime running lights and the rear lamps, a rear spoiler, plus automatic air conditioning with a pollen filter, a trip computer, driver's seat height adjustment and Bluetooth phone connectivity. Hybrid models get alloy wheels and a colour TFT multi-information display too. Most Auris buyers, though, opt for mid-range Icon spec, which includes all the key power plants and requires a premium of around £1,000 over a base-trimmed hybrid variant. At this level, as well as that Toyota Touch 2 multimedia system with its integrated reversing camera and a better quality stereo setup, you get niceties like 16-inch alloy wheels, front fog lights, leather for the steering wheel and the gear knob, and also powered rear windows. Beyond that, progressing further up the trim hierarchy gives you satellite navigation and heated seats in the Business Edition models and a smarter Alcantara trimmed interior in this Design variant. Finally, at the top of the range, Top XL spec throws in LED headlights, part leather seats, climate control, parking sensors, a smart entry system and the Toyota Touch 2 with Go Plus infotainment package, which also includes voice activation and a Wi-Fi hotspot function. Many buyers, though, will prefer to stick with a lower order model and order additional niceties from the options list, which, amongst other things, includes iPad holders for the rear seat backs, a DVD player, and this particular model's lovely sky view panoramic glass roof. Safety-wise, all models are very well provided for, getting ISOFIX child seat mountings, anti-whiplash head restraints and 7 airbags, including a driver's knee bag. To try and make sure you never have to use them, there is VSC, Vehicle Stability Control, and an ABS braking system with brake assist for emergency stops, plus hill start assist to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions. Want to go further? Then your dealer will suggest you consider the affordable Toyota Safety Sense package that is available across the range, provided you've avoided entry-level trim. And there's a good reason to go for this too, because it'll give your Auris a more affordable insurance grouping. This option includes 4 key elements: an automatic high beam system that'll automatically dip your lights for you at night, road sign assist to picture road signs as you pass them and display them on the dash, lane departure warning setup to alert dozy drivers who might be veering out of their lanes on the highway, and most importantly, a pre-collision system that at speeds between 6 miles an hour and 49 miles an hour scans the road ahead as you drive for potential collision hazards. If one's detected, then you'll be warned. If you don't respond, or you aren't able to, then the brakes will automatically be applied to decrease the severity of any resulting accident. Owning one of these is almost certain to be a pleasantly incident and expense-free experience, something highlighted in this revised model by the running cost reductions achieved through Toyota's Optimal Drive package of efficiency initiatives. Now, these represent a combination of advanced technologies and also engineering enhancements, all aimed at improving fuel economy and emissions across the now fully Euro 6 compliant range of power plants. That includes things like a stop and start system that cuts the engine when you don't need it, stuck in traffic or waiting at the lights. A setup that, in our view, rather pointlessly, includes an eco counter, able to tell you how long that engine has been stopped during any given journey. This kind of technology seems rather crude when put up against the cleverness of the engine that aims to define this Auris model, the 1.8-litre VVTi petrol-electric hybrid synergy drive unit. As before, it delivers the best efficiency in the model lineup, in this slightly enhanced guise, managing even better returns than the original version of this Mark II Auris could deliver. Here, the combined cycle fuel showing has improved to 78.5 miles per gallon, while CO2 emissions can now be as low as 81 grams per kilometre, although both of these stats depend on the Auris in question being fitted with smaller 15-inch wheels. In terms of CO2 cleanliness and therefore tax efficiency, that showing puts this Toyota out of reach of even the most frugal of its diesel rivals. And when it comes to the hybrid version's fuel consumption, well, yes, it's true that on paper at least, something like a Ford Focus Econectic or a Volkswagen Golf Blue Motion can return a slightly better combined cycle showing, but at what cost to the atmosphere? And remember that increasingly European emissions legislation is starting to penalise the nitrogen oxides and harmful particulates that diesel engines put out. An Auris hybrid emits virtually none of these, and that means zero road tax for the first year and further beneficial tax ratings for company car users and operators. For example, the Auris hybrid sits in the lowest company car tax band for non-electric vehicles, which means that in running one as a 40% taxpayer, you'll pay around £20 a month to the inland revenue than those opting for a similarly priced diesel Volkswagen Golf. Of course, for some buyers, particularly company operators, diesel power still remains the default choice in this segment. And aware of this, Toyota has at last brought us a truly class-competitive D4D unit in this car. The 112 brake horsepower 1.6 litre engine in question was co-developed with BMW, who use it in their 1 Series and their Mini Cooper models. Somewhat more frugally, it has to be said, than is the case here. Plumbed into the Auris, this 1.6 litre power plant delivers 67.3 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 108 grams per kilometre of CO2. Further down the range, the 90 brake horsepower 1.4 litre D4D unit continues to be offered, now substantially revised, being lighter, cleaner and able to return 80.7 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 92 grams per kilometre of CO2. That leaves the two conventional petrol variants. The 99 brake horsepower 1.33 litre VVT-i unit used on the very cheapest models is one of Toyota's oldest units, a fact reflected first by its efficiency stats, 51.4 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 128 grams per kilometre of CO2. And secondly, by the fact that the much pokier 116 brake horsepower 1.2 litre turbo model that I'm trying here is able to do considerably better, this version managing 58.9 miles per gallon and 112 grams per kilometre. Across the range, maintenance should prove to be affordable, repair costs have been kept to a minimum, and there are a range of prepaid service plans available so that you can budget ahead. Residual values are comparable to those of mainstream rivals, but you get a longer and more comprehensive warranty than most of them can offer, 5 years or 100,000 miles, whichever comes first. Finally, let's look at insurance. Helped by the fact that the Auris is unlikely to attract boy racers, all models get pretty low ratings, but you can improve these further still if you opt for the extra cost Safety Sense package. Bear in mind, though, that this option isn't available on the entry-level active grade and so can't be ordered on the entry-level petrol-powered 1.33 litre variant, which is rated at Group 8E. Go for the 1.2 litre petrol turbo derivative I'm trying here, and you're looking at Group 14E or Group 12E if you have the Safety Sense package. Avoid entry-level trim on a hybrid model, and that variant's quoted insurance grouping of 12E can be reduced to 9E with the Safety Sense package. And this option also makes quite a difference with the D4D diesels too, reducing the Group 9E rating of the 1.4 model to Group 7E and the Group 14E rating of the 1.6 to Group 12E. If you're the kind of person who brings uncompromising reason to the purchase decision when it comes to getting yourself a new family hatchback, then you'll bond with this Auris right away. Optimal drive technology, hybrid power, low servicing costs, decent residuals, it'll all be music to your ears. What's changed here, though, is that in this improved second generation form, this car now offers a lot more than that. You simply don't expect it to be as sharp looking, as accomplished to drive and as value orientated as it is now. Plus the introduction of 1.2 litre petrol turbo power and the 1.6 litre D4D diesel engine mean that at last this car is a fully competitive prospect if either you don't want hybrid power or you can't quite stretch to it. The petrol-electric option's worth trying, though, and it remains unique in this segment. It all means that this generation Auris deserves to shake off its image as a family hatchback make-weight. True, there are more dynamic, more versatile and more upmarket feeling choices in this class, but not many of them stack up quite as well as an overall ownership proposition. Finally then, a family hatchback with a Toyota badge that's class competitive in almost every way. It's been a long time coming.